What if the most dangerous threat to our society isn't a political ideology or an economic crisis, but something much more subtle? What if it's the quiet erosion of our ability to think for ourselves? Imagine a world where people don't question anything, where a constant flood of information has dulled our minds, turning them from tools of inquiry into passive sponges. This isn't science fiction. It's the reality many of us are living right now. In this video, we're going to dive into the uncomfortable truth behind the disappearance of critical thinking and the dangerous rise of what I call cognitive conformity, a phenomenon where we surrender our intellectual independence, not through force, but through a slow, almost unnoticed drift. And by the end of this journey, you'll discover the single most powerful act you can take to reclaim your mind from a system designed to keep you comfortably numb. But before we begin, if you believe that truth is worth seeking and that a strong mind is the foundation of a free society, take a moment to subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments below. The ideas we're about to explore might challenge your perceptions, and they're definitely worth sharing with those who still dare to think. Let's start with a simple yet profound truth. Thinking is hard. It's a demanding activity that requires effort, focus, and a willingness to be wrong. But here's the problem. Our modern world isn't built for deep thinking. It rewards speed, quick reactions, and conformity. We're conditioned to consume, not to contemplate. From the algorithms that feed us a steady diet of what we already believe to a cultural pressure to pick a side instantly, we're being actively steered away from critical thought. The renowned philosopher and social critic Noam Chomsky warned us about this decades ago. He explained how power structures often rely on what he called the manufacture of consent. By controlling the information we receive and shaping the narratives we hear, a system can make people agree with something without ever truly understanding why. Critical thinking, the act of pausing to ask, "Is this really true?" is seen as inconvenient. It disrupts the outrage cycle. It slows down online debates. It challenges deeply held beliefs. And in a world that's obsessed with being right, simply asking a question is seen as an act of rebellion. But how did we get here? One of the biggest culprits is the sheer volume of information we face every day. Our brains were not built for this level of input. When we're overwhelmed, our minds take shortcuts. Instead of evaluating an idea on its own merit, we look for clues from others. Social proof becomes our guide. We see a post with 1 million likes and assume it must be important or true. This isn't a sign of unintelligence. It's a natural mental shortcut being exploited. We're being conditioned to follow signals, not reason. You will be shocked at what this information overload is doing to your brain in the next part. Another concerning trend is the decline of sustained reading. The neuroscientist Marianne Wolf has studied how digital media is literally rewiring our brains. We've become excellent at skimming, scanning, and jumping from one thing to the next, but the deep, focused attention required for critical thinking is atrophying. How often do you read an entire article without checking your phone? How often do you pause after hearing something controversial to truly think about it, rather than just react? These small habits, once common, are now becoming rare. The late astronomer and science communicator Carl Sagan once said, "We live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology." He wasn't just concerned about ignorance. He was worried about our inability to critically evaluate the very systems we depend on. In a world full of opinions and hot takes, the greatest rebellion you can commit is the quiet act of thinking clearly. But the problem isn't just technological or educational. It's also deeply emotional. Thinking critically is uncomfortable. It forces us to confront our own biases and admit that we might not know everything. It challenges our egos. This is known as cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort we feel when our cherished beliefs clash with new evidence. And in a culture that values certainty and being right above all, this feeling is deeply threatening. So what do? We defend our positions. We retreat into echo chambers. We repeat slogans. We choose certainty over truth. We avoid the kind of honest, open dialogue that has powered human progress for centuries. What we're witnessing is not just a decline in thinking, it's a social shift toward intellectual laziness. And the consequences are devastating. When people stop thinking, they stop questioning. And when they stop questioning, they become vulnerable to manipulation, propaganda, and fear. So, who benefits when a population no longer thinks for itself? Stay with me, because what comes next will reveal just how deeply these forces are woven into our daily lives and why reclaiming your capacity to think is not just a personal goal, but a moral responsibility. To understand the roots of this problem, we need to look beyond the surface and examine how certain systems have evolved. Let's start with the education system. The late award-winning teacher and critic John Taylor Gatto argued that modern education doesn't exist to create independent thinkers. In his view, compulsory schooling was designed during the industrial age to prepare people for factory life, to be predictable, obedient, and non-disruptive. Think about that for a second. Instead of learning how to think, we're often taught what to think. From a young age, we're rewarded for memorizing and regurgitating information, not for the originality or depth of our thoughts. Conformity is praised, while curiosity is often seen as a distraction. Over time, the message becomes clear. Follow the rules, color inside the lines, and don't ask too many questions. This pattern doesn't end with school. It only gets more intense in adult life, in the workplace, in the media, and even in our social circles. We learn that questioning the consensus can cost us. The fear of being labeled as difficult or controversial is often enough to silence our most pressing doubts. And so, we stay quiet. But that silence, over time, becomes complicity. The psychologist Erich Fromm wrote about this in his book, Escape from Freedom. He explained that many people secretly want to surrender their freedom of thought because true freedom comes with responsibility, and that can be terrifying. Thinking for yourself means you can no longer blame others for your ignorance. You can't take comfort in the crowd. You must face the uncertainty of truth. And for many, that's too heavy a burden. So instead, we choose comfort, distraction, and simplicity over complexity. And in doing so, we become easier to control. You won't believe how social media is intentionally designed to make you less of a critical thinker. I'll explain everything in a minute. Social media has accelerated this problem to an unimaginable degree. What was once a tool for connection has become a battlefield of opinion wars and algorithmic manipulation. Every platform is designed to keep you scrolling, reacting, and consuming, not thinking. You're constantly nudged toward content that confirms your existing beliefs, encouraged to respond instantly and emotionally. These platforms reward engagement, not truth, and they thrive on division, not understanding. In all this noise, the voice of reason is drowned out. Thoughtfulness appears slow, weak, and even irrelevant. To think critically in a society that punishes doubt is an act of rebellion. You risk being misunderstood, ostracized, or even hated. But you also gain something invaluable: clarity, self-respect, and the quiet power that comes from knowing that your beliefs are truly yours, not programmed into you by an algorithm. This brings us to a more personal question. Why do so many of us feel lost, anxious, or unfulfilled, even with more information and technology than any generation before? The answer isn't in what we have, but in what we've lost. One of the greatest losses is the habit of inner dialogue, the ability to sit with a question, explore it, and allow truth to emerge through reflection. We have outsourced our thinking to machines, to media, and to public opinion. But no algorithm can tell you what is true for you. No trending topic can replace your inner voice. And no mass movement can substitute for the quiet certainty of a well-examined belief. So, what can we do? We can start by cultivating awareness. Be aware of your own mental habits. Be aware of the sources you consume. Be aware of when you're truly thinking versus just reacting. One powerful practice is metacognition, which is just a fancy word for thinking about your thinking. Ask yourself, what's influencing my opinion right now? Am I open to being wrong? Am I engaging with this idea, or just passively absorbing it? Another practice is dialectical thinking, the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and explore them. This is not about being indecisive. It's about mental strength. It allows you to move beyond simple binaries like us versus them and into the realm where true understanding is born. The philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti said, "To understand the immeasurable, the mind must be extraordinarily quiet, still. That stillness, so rare in our fast-paced age, is where the seeds of wisdom grow." Let's be honest though, critical thinking isn't something you learn overnight. It's a discipline. It requires reading not just headlines, but entire books and nuanced arguments. So, as we end this journey, remember the most revolutionary thing you can do right now is not to shout, not to conform, not to repeat, but to think. Let the others sleepwalk through slogans and screens. Let them trade their freedom for validation. But not you. You are awake now, and once you awaken, you can never go back. If this message resonated with you, share it. Not because it's trendy, but because it's necessary. Leave a comment with your reflections, your doubts, and your insights, because critical thinking doesn't grow in silence. It grows in dialogue. And if you're still with me, know this: you are not alone. There is a quiet revolution happening, a movement not of noise, but of minds, not of outrage, but of awareness. And it begins every time one person chooses to ask the harder question. Let that person be you. Stay curious, stay awake, and above all, keep thinking. Thanks for watching Alone Psyche. It requires listening, not just to those you agree with, but especially to those you don't. It requires humility, the kind that accepts uncertainty as part of the journey. And above all, it requires a rejection of intellectual laziness. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If everyone around you believes something without question, that's your cue to pause and investigate. In a time when ignorance is loud and confidence is often mistaken for competence, thinking deeply is not just a personal virtue, it's a public service. The future of any society depends not on the volume of its opinions, but on the quality of its thought. And the most powerful change begins not with a mass movement, but with one person who chooses to think clearly in a world that doesn't. In the final part of this journey, we're going to uncover the most important truth of all, the core reason why critical thinking is disappearing, and what you can do to not only resist this tide, but to become a light for others. What you're about to hear could change the way you see your mind, your relationships, and your role in the world. At the heart of this entire crisis, beneath the digital noise, the failing institutions, and the cultural polarization, lies something even more insidious. The real reason critical thinking is disappearing is not because people are incapable of it, but because they are afraid of what it might reveal. To think critically is to risk everything that gives us psychological safety, our identity, our beliefs, our tribe. For many, those things are simply too precious to question. We live in a time when identity has become sacred. We define ourselves by our opinions, our affiliations, and our ideologies. To challenge an idea is now often seen as a personal attack. But this is the very illusion that destroys thought, the belief that we are our ideas. You are not your political party. You are not your religion. You are not your social group. You are a human being with the capacity to evolve, to learn, and to change. And that journey begins the moment you detach your worth from your current beliefs. The final and most important truth is this: critical thinking is not just an intellectual skill. It is a spiritual act. It is the act of honoring truth over comfort, growth over certainty, and freedom over approval. It is the quiet decision to live with your eyes open, even when the light is uncomfortable. Once you start thinking critically, you begin to see the structures that surround you, the systems of manipulation, the algorithms of control, the masks people wear. It can be overwhelming and even painful, but it is real. And reality, no matter how uncomfortable, is the only foundation upon which true freedom can be built. As the great psychologist Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And yet facing our inner world, our unconscious motives, our inherited beliefs, our cognitive traps, is the very essence of thinking. Critical thinking isn't just about questioning the world. It's about questioning yourself. It's about asking, why do I believe what I believe? Where did this idea come from? What part of me is afraid to let go of it? When you ask those questions honestly, a new world opens up. Not just a world of knowledge, but of wisdom. And wisdom is what our society is starving for. In a culture addicted to quick answers, wisdom invites deeper questions. In a system built on noise, wisdom offers silence. In an era of mass conformity, wisdom dares to be free. This is your invitation, not just to think, but to wake up, to stop living as a product of your environment and start becoming the architect of your own mind. Because no school, no system, and no social media platform will do this for you. The responsibility is yours alone. And when you rise to it, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see with clarity. You feel what it's like to live in alignment with truth, not borrowed truth, not popular truth, but your own hard-earned truth. You begin to notice when manipulation is being used against you. You start to see the difference between information and propaganda, between education and indoctrination, and between connection and performance. Most importantly, you begin to lead, not with noise or ego, but with depth. You become a light in a dark room, a voice of calm in a storm of outrage, and a grounded thinker in a world of reactionaries. This is what the world needs now more than ever. Not louder voices, not sharper arguments, but deeper minds. Minds that are willing to sit in complexity. Minds that are willing to say, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. Minds that are no longer seeking to win debates, but to understand reality. If you want to change the world, start by changing the way you think. The rise of cognitive conformity is not a cause, it's a symptom of fear, of fatigue, and of a world too distracted to look inward.